if he meant it, it would be the best news we would have had, but he doesn't mean it. The man is actually on a serious campaign to extend the term of office. Look at what Munyaradzi Machacha is doing. Look at what Daniel Gary was doing in March East yesterday. Look at what his cronies are doing. So they are on a serious campaign mode to extend, to push for a third term. And with the connivance of Chabangu and others, they control, parliament. So this is a disaster. They want to push this country to war. They want to push this country to Armageddon. I appeal to Emmerson Mnangagwa, abandon this idea of a third term. Abandon this idea of a third term, because it will lead this country to a war. But certainly, my plea and the plea of decent Zimbabweans will fall on deaf ears, because the man is desperate. More so those in the courtyard, those that have been feeding from him, they are desperate to see that he continues. They're saying 2030, it's way after 2030. He wants the same 38 years that Robert Mugabe had. Fortunately or unfortunately, he doesn't have the 38 years that Mugabe had in 1980. So it's a disaster. This country is on a precipice. This country is on a knife edge because of these games that they are playing of trying to extend his term of office to 2030. It's a disaster, but unfortunately, one that will cause the unnecessary splitting of blood in this country. We lost over 50,000 people during the War of Liberation. We lost over 30,000 people during Kukura Wundi. We lost thousands of people during the birth of the MDC, the Land Reform Program. Enough blood has been lost in this country. We are losing millions of people, thousands of people through the soft genocide of hospitals that don't have medicines, of hospitals that don't have cancer machines. Enough blood has been lost at the hands of ZANU-PF. Tinzireyo tsitsi tiregerereyo hapana chataka kutadzerai.
Masquera say in Zimbabwe, welcome to our channel Zoom Confessions and Deep Secrets. Kanagari kutanga kukwepa neno channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Kana subscribe, but don't forget to comment and share this video. Masquera Zimbabwe tabigirai nyaya yabuditswa ya President Emmerson Mnangagwa arikunzi is set to stand trial mu High Court nenyaya ye government's failure to implement legislation aimed at preventing and combating torture. You know, nyaya is a serious issue in Zimbabwe. Kesi ya simudwa na a prominent human rights lawyer Obey Shava uyo where Shava Law Chambers uyo katora iya achiti he was a victim of torture. Shava akurepresentwa na Tindaibiti uyo arikuba from the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. So Shava is seeking a court order to compel Mnangagwa pamwechete Mama correspondents and Science Minister of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs, Honorable Ziyambi Zakari. The Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, because they want him to rectify the Convention against torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. This conversation, this convention, by the United Nations General Assembly. December 1984 and they implement June 1987. So what is a statement the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights in regard to this case was cheating. In Harare, President Emmerson Mnangagwa is standing trial in court over his government's reluctance to enact legislation aimed at preventing, prohibiting and combating torture, which is prevalent in the country. The trial is scheduled to commence on Monday at 10 a.m. at Harare High Court, where President Mnangagwa is being sued by the prominent human rights lawyer Obey Shava of Shava Law Chambers, who is a victim of torture. In an application filed at Harare High Court on 12 December 2023, Shava, who is represented by Tendai Biti of the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, wants the court to compel President Mnangagwa and other respondents, namely Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Minister Honorable Ziyambi, Parliament and the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, ZHRC, to accent to accent and ratify the Convention against torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment that was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in December 1984 and which came into operation in June 1987. The human rights lawyer, who is a victim of torture after he was tortured by some unknown assailants in July 2023, argued that torture, violence, enforced disappearances, and abductions are widespread in Zimbabwe. Hence, President Mnangagwa must be compelled to accede to and deposit the necessary instruments of accession to the Convention against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment with the UN and place the same for ratification before Parliament within 12 months of the granting of the court order. He charged that Mnangagwa's failure to accede to the Convention against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment is a breach of the Constitution. It is also a violation of the right to equal protection of law codified by Section 56 of the Constitution and a breach of his right to constitutionalism and the rule of law guaranteed under Section 47 of the Constitution. Shall bemoan the system pattern of enforced disappearances, abduction, torture, cruel and degrading treatment, which several people, including himself, human rights defenders, opposition political party supporters, legislators, and ordinary citizens have been subjected to, including being injected with unknown substances. He urged that the cases of torture are never investigated and no one is prosecuted for committing such heinous crime. The Constitution shall urge to protect first-generation rights such as the right to life, liberty, fair trial, human dignity, and the right not to be subjected to torture, cruel or degrading treatment, and that torture is implicitly prohibited under Section 48 of the Constitution, which provides for the right to life, and also under Section 51, which protects the right to human dignity. The human rights lawyer argued that despite the existence of progressive constitutional provisions on torture, personal liberty, fair trial, legal representation, human conditions of detention, and human dignity, the same have not been incorporated into subsidiary legislation and are not being enforced in practice. Shava, who stated that there is a culture of impunity which has left hundreds of people without legal recourse, said it was regrettable that Zimbabwe has not ratified the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the Rome Statute, which would criminalize enforced disappearances and torture and provide means to seek redress internationally. He said the respondents cited in his application, who are Honorable Ziyambi, President Mnangagwa, Parliament, and Yeku, are bound by customary international law, which is part of international law of Zimbabwe, to take measures to ensure the enactment of a law criminalizing torture, and stated that there is no reason why Honorable Ziyambi, President Mnangagwa, Parliament, and Yeku should fail to accede to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Shava submitted that Zimbabwe is out of step with the rest of Africa and the world, as 162 out of 193 members of the UN have become state parties to the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. He contended that out of 55 African countries, only 4, namely Zimbabwe, Angola, Tanzania, Democratic Republic, have neither signed nor ratified the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, while of the 15 such countries, 12 are state parties and only two, Zimbabwe and Tanzania, have neither signed or nor ratified the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. The human rights lawyers urged that by standing out and refusing to accede to and ratify the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, Zimbabwe is putting itself in the disrespectable category of pariah states. As a decent country bound by the law, by the rule of law and constitutionalism, Zimbabwe Shara said should sign and ratify the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment to ensure protection of fundamental human rights and freedoms and the rule of law. Ndo nyakabudidzwa muri Zimbabwe. Tingazoti nena sei nyaya itudziwo zvamuri kufunga pamusoro penyaya iyi mu comment section.